Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is this week's meals for you. To get started, we are going to do an air fryer recipe. I may have potentially shown you this one in the past, but I think it's a little bit different of a recipe. So again, I've linked the recipe below for you in the video description if you want to give it a try. So we are going to make a teriyaki air fryer salmon bowl. So to get started, we are going to take 3 salmon fillets. I just purchased this from, was either Costco or Sam's Club, and it just is a skin on salmon. So you just want to get the air fryer preheated first of all. Mine requires a preheating of 7 minutes, so I was just getting that preheated while I was attempting to get the skins off of the salmon. The recipe does state that you want to have it skinless. You can definitely buy the skinless fillets, and usually I like to buy them. I don't know why in this instance I bought the one with the skins on it, because it really took a lot of time to get it filleted, especially being I wasn't using a very good knife. So once you get all of this skin off, or if you're lucky enough and purchased it without skin, you just want to cut it into about 1-inch cubes. Next up, you're going to get the marinade made for the salmon. Now I doubled this recipe, but I will give you guys the recipe as it is written, and again it is linked below in the video description for you. So to get started, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of a liquid aminos. The recipe actually recommends using a coconut aminos, but you could definitely use soy sauce if that's what you have available. And then you're going to add 1 teaspoon of sesame oil, 1 tablespoon of honey, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and then half a teaspoon of sea salt. I just used a Redmond's real salt in this. That's what I always use. Works great. So you're just going to whisk it up to get it nice and combined, and then you're going to take 1 tablespoon of that mixture and just reserve it and set it aside. And then you're going to add your cut up salmon to that, and just make sure that the salmon is well coated, and just set that aside because we're still waiting for that air fryer to get preheated. One thing I wanted to have in our salmon bowls was some edamame, so I'm just taking some of my frozen edamame from last year's garden and just getting it steamed. I actually end up just shelling that edamame. So the air fryer is all preheated, so we are going to add the salmon into the air fryer, and we're just going to make sure we add it into a single layer. You don't want it to really touch each other because then it doesn't get nice and crispy or nice and cooked through. So we're going to put it into a single layer. It says leave space in between each one, and we're going to cook the salmon at 400 degrees for 7 minutes. The edges of each cube will be crispy and the teriyaki sauce will be caramelized. It happened with some of them got a little bit burnt, especially on the second batch. It definitely burnt a little bit more. One thing we love to top our salmon bowls with is this sriracha mayonnaise. I just kind of eyeball all of these ingredients. I don't have a set recipe for it. It's just kind of, I've been making it for a while. So to get started, we're going to use about 1 cup of mayonnaise and then 1 to 2 tablespoons of sriracha sauce. Depending on how hot you like it, you're not going to obviously put in the full 2 tablespoons if you're not a fan of spice. And then I added approximately 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, about 1 teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder, and then I think I came in with about a tablespoon of white granulated sugar. And then you're just going to mix that together. Now this ideally should be refrigerated because it tastes a lot better when it's cooled, but this night I was just kind of making it on the fly, so we had it at room temperature and it tastes perfectly fine. So to get these salmon bowls assembled, I'm going to use some rice. This is kind of the inspiration that I had for this recipe, is because again I had leftover rice in my fridge. I tend to make a lot of rice at once and then just kind of use it throughout the week for leftovers. We're going to put our teriyaki salmon on top of that. There's our shelled edamame beans. I cut up some avocado, and then I was going to take some of those seaweed things that you see in the background there. I was going to take some and just kind of crush it over top, kind of make it like a sushi bowl, but I decided not to do that. And we're just going to top it with that spicy mayo there. I'm unsure of why they state to reserve that leftover marinade because we never ended up using it. I just topped it with some black and white sesame seeds, and this was just really, really delicious. It's one of my favorite meals. For the next meal, we are going to make a turkey tetrazzini. I had some leftover spaghetti noodles in my fridge, so this was kind of the inspiration for this meal. This is a Pioneer Woman recipe, and I love her recipes. They are so good and flavorful. This recipe was definitely a good one. I did kind of improvise a little bit with it and kind of put my own twist to it. To get started, we're gonna take about 1 to 2 pounds of a boneless, skinless turkey breast, and I'm just gonna lightly season it with some salt and pepper. I have my oven preheated to 375 degrees, and we're just gonna put these into a Pyrex casserole dish and just cook them until they reach 165 internal temperature. I think it took around like 40 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to get to that. So next we're gonna make the sauce. We're gonna take 4 tablespoons of butter and we're gonna get that melted. And then we're gonna add in 4 cloves of minced garlic and then approximately 1 pound of mushrooms. So I just sliced my mushrooms up, and then we're just gonna season that with a little bit of salt. And then we wanna cook it until those mushrooms are kind of just nice and tender. And then we're gonna come in and add 1 cup of a white wine to this. If you don't wanna use alcohol, one thing that I have found to do that works really, really good is I just take white wine vinegar and just dilute it with half water, half vinegar. Actually, it's more kind of like a 1/4 cup vinegar to water. That's a really good substitution for wine if you don't want to use wine or if you don't have it available. You want to cook that until the liquid reduces by half. And then what you're going to do is stir in 1/3 cup of flour. You can use whatever kind of flour you want to use. And then just stir it until it's nice and thick. And then you're going to come in and add 4 cups of turkey, or you can use chicken broth, and then you're gonna save a little bit more just for thinning the sauce out if you need to. So get that all stirred in until there's no more clumps in there, and then you're gonna come in and add 1 8-ounce package of cream cheese. Just make sure that it's softened and cut into little cubes because it tends to break up a little bit easier that way. I didn't get them completely all dissolved in here and it was perfectly fine. So you're gonna have your heat set to a medium-low while you're doing this, and the recipe does say don't worry about making sure if your cream cheese is melted or not. It will eventually melt. Next up, we are going to come in and add our cooked turkey. So the recipe suggests 3 cups of cooked turkey, either shredded or diced. And then you're also going to add 1 cup of finely chopped black olives. And then if you want to, add 1.5 cups of frozen green peas. You can also add 4 slices of bacon, cooked bacon, and then 1 cup of Monterey Jack cheese and 1 cup of Parmesan cheese, like grated Parmesan. I just used a smoked cheddar in this and it was really, really, really delicious. And then just season it with salt and pepper kind of as you're going along. Next up, you're gonna add your cooked spaghetti. So if you are using just regular spaghetti in this, like you're not using leftover stuff like I was, just use about 1.5 pounds of a thin spaghetti, and it suggests to break it into halves. So what I chose to do was just serve this as kind of like in the pot done. It was late this night and I was super hungry and I didn't want to go through the next step. So the next step is to preheat your oven to 350, pour this all into a casserole dish, sprinkle a little panko breadcrumbs on top, and cook it for about 20 minutes. So again, I chose not to do that because we were starving, but this was really, really good served up this way and it was a lot quicker. The next meal was really, really delicious. We're gonna make something called a creamy chicken and corn pasta with bacon. Now you see here I have ground beef. I did not actually have any chicken in my freezer. We are so low on our chicken right now. So I improvised and used some ground beef to this, and this actually turned out really, really good with the ground beef. I'm gonna get the beef started to brown up, and while the beef is browning up, I actually have 2 packets of bacon just cooking in my oven. I like to cook a lot of bacon at once and just kind of leave it in the fridge for us to snack on during the week. So I was just getting that cooked, took that out and set it aside. So to this cooked ground beef, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in and add 1.5 teaspoons of a smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, some freshly grated black pepper, and we're just gonna again cook that until it is all combined and cooked through. So on the other stovetop there, I have a large pot of boiling water, and to that I'm gonna add about 10 ounces of a bow tie pasta. You can use whatever pasta you like in this. It just calls for bow tie, and I found that it's best to use like a smaller pasta in this. So I got that cooking over there on the other burner. Once my ground beef is completely cooked through, we're gonna take that and put it in a bowl and set that aside. To the same skillet, we're gonna add about 1 tablespoon of olive oil, some salt and pepper, and then 2 cups of a cooked corn kernel. So I'm just using my canned corn here, and it worked perfect. It was already pre-cooked because it cooks during the canning process. So you're just gonna take 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika and 1 teaspoon of chili powder and just season that corn and just cook it just until the corn kind of absorbs that flavor. It says to take half of that corn out of the pot. I don't know why it suggest that, but I did it as the recipe suggested. So next you're gonna add 1 cup of heavy cream to that corn, and then you're gonna bring that to a gentle boil. So you wanna just bring it to a simmer. And then what you're gonna do is come in and add half a cup of a shredded Parmesan cheese, and you're gonna stir that on low heat until that cheese melts. So once the cheese is melted, then you're gonna come in and add your cooked pasta to that sauce. And then if you're using the chicken, like the original recipe calls for, add the chicken in at this time, but we use the ground beef, so we're gonna add the ground beef into here, and then it says to top it with the cooked bacon and the remaining half of the corn kernels. And then he says you can definitely top it with some fresh herbs like thyme, oregano, or marjoram. Again, I don't know why they suggested to remove the half of the corn, because you just put it right back in with the stuff. So I don't know if you want to take that extra step. I didn't really think it was necessary to do that. But yeah, this recipe was really, really, really good with the ground beef. Definitely, I would make this with the ground beef over the chicken. But if you're looking to reduce red meat, definitely the chicken's a good option. The next meal is one of my favorite. I have a lot of favorite recipes. This is one of them. It is a Swedish meatball. I have not made this in a really, really long time, so I was kind of looking forward to it this night. So what I have here is just some pre-made turkey meatballs that I made. I usually make this with a beef meatball, and it's really, really good, but we decided to do turkey this night because I'm trying to get variation of different meats every single night. So turkey was on the docket for tonight. So we're gonna use our turkey meatballs, and we're just gonna get these cooked in the oven. These particular meatballs, being the size that they are, they take about 30 to 40 minutes to get completely cooked through. So I'm gonna get those starting to cook. Next up, what you wanna do is take 2 cups of beef broth, and you just wanna get that warmed because you're gonna add the warm beef broth to this mixture. To a medium-sized skillet, you are gonna add 4 tablespoons of butter, and then you just wanna melt that, and then you're gonna slowly whisk in 3 tablespoons of flour. I just use an unbleached all-purpose flour. Once you get that nice and cooked, and then it starts to smell a little bit nutty, so like the raw flour taste has kind of been cooked off, you're gonna slowly whisk in your 2 cups of your warmed beef broth. And then you just wanna cook that until it gets a nice slow bubble. Once it gets to that point, you are gonna come in and add 1 cup of heavy cream, half a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, or more. In my case, I like Worcestershire, so I add a lot of it in here. And then 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard, and then half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of pepper. And then you're just gonna whisk this, and then you want it to kind of simmer and thicken up a little bit. So on the stovetop over there, I am getting some noodles cooked because I really love to serve these over top of noodles. And this particular night, that's what kind of noodles I'm using. So the meatballs are all done, so I took them out of the oven. If you're using like pre-made meatballs, these meatballs were completely raw, like they were not pre-cooked, so I had to cook them until they were cooked through. But if you're just using packaged meatballs, just follow the direction on the package for them. And then so once that sauce is kind of thickened up a little bit, you're gonna add your meatballs into that sauce. I just like to make sure the meatballs are completely coated with the sauce. And then you're gonna cover it and simmer it on low heat for about 10 minutes. And then it does say season to taste. I find that I have to usually come in and add a little bit more salt to it. I think it's because my beef broth, I can it unsalted. So I find that my recipes really do need to have an extra bit of salt added. So the noodles are cooked. I'm just gonna get them rinsed off and set aside. One thing that I picked up at the local farmer's market was some lettuce. So we had salad on this night. So love salad, and I'm so happy that lettuce is slowly starting to come back again. So I'm just building my salad here. I just put lettuce, carrots, some pickled red onions. And then just for the salad dressing, I'm just gonna use some balsamic vinegar, a little bit of olive oil, and salt and pepper, and call it good. It's such a delicious, easy to make. I think that salad dressings are something that a lot of people get intimidated to make. They think it's complicated, but really it's not. Just use like an oil, a vinegar, and some seasoning, and you have a delicious delicious salad dressing. So I'm gonna get it all topped up here, and this again would just hit the spot. Such a good meal. Next meal, we're gonna attempt to make some blueberry scones. This recipe did not turn out how it was supposed to. It did end up turning out pretty good, but definitely was a disaster getting to the end point. I think I actually got this recipe from Jessica over at Three Rivers Homestead on her Instagram page. She has a lot of recipes highlighted on there, and this was one of them. At least I think that's where I got this from. I didn't write it down on the piece of paper. The recipe calls to use 1 cup of buttermilk. I didn't have any buttermilk, so I just made some. All as you do to make buttermilk is just take 1 cup of milk and then add a teaspoon of vinegar to that and just let that sit until it starts to curdle a little bit. So I was just getting that started at the beginning of the recipe, and I just set that aside. So to get started, what we're gonna do is take 2 cups of flour. I'm just using an unbleached all-purpose flour. And then we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of sugar, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to that. And then we'll just stir that until it's all combined. And then what you want to do is come in and add a 1/4 cup of butter. I just used a chilled butter in this, and I'm just going to use my pastry blender and just get it kind of all mixed in. It says just blend it until it is a nice fine consistency. And then to another medium-sized bowl, we're gonna take our 1 cup of buttermilk that we just made, and we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 egg, and 1 tablespoon of lemon zest or orange zest. I just chose to do lemon in this because lemon and blueberries to me just kind of work together. So you're going to stir that together, and then you are going to add that to your dry mixture and then just stir that until everything is combined. The next step is to add 1 to 2 cups of blueberries. Now the recipe does not specify whether it needs to be fresh blueberries or frozen blueberries, and I think this maybe is where I went fatally wrong in the recipe. I added frozen blueberries, but they were really frozen, like clumped frozen, so I put them in the microwave for a little bit. And what happened is a whole bunch of the moisture ended up like in the bowl, and then I just dumped them all in here, and it made these like a soupy mess. Like this was so liquidy. Every single scone recipe that I've looked at, it looks like you clump it on a floured countertop and then you can make little triangles with it, and it's really thick. As you can see here, as I'm putting it on this tray, it is not thick. It's mushy and not good. So what I decided to do was just, after getting it all over my hands, trying to shape them, was to add more flour. So I probably added an additional cup of flour to this. So I'm adding in flour, probably like I would say maybe a 1/4 cup at a time, stirring it in, more flour, stirring it in, and then that just didn't work. So what I opted to do was just turn my oven on to 400 degrees, butter a cake pan, and put this batter into here and cook it like a cake, because it was not going to form the nice beautiful scone pieces that you see whenever you see a scone. So it ended up being like this blueberry cake. So I cooked this probably for, the recipe says if you're doing the scones 20 to 22 minutes, but because I did the cake version I ended up cooking this for probably about 45 minutes. So you just want to cook it until the toothpick comes clean. But yeah, this is just kind of a little bit of a disaster. Overall though, it tasted really good. So I think next time I make this, I'm just gonna throw it in a cake pan instead of going and adding all that extra flour, because it was a little bit denser than I would like, but it turned out really good. That is gonna be the last meal on this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope I gave you a little inspiration for your upcoming meals this week. Have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.